Hey friends, welcome back to another episode of Better on Purpose. I'm thankful that you decided to join me today. If this is your first episode listening, welcome. And if you're returning, thank you for continuing to show up for these conversations with me. For me, lately, there have been a lot of themes around emotional awareness, relationships, growth, boundaries, and identity. All the messy in between places of being human. And today's conversation is another one of those. I often preface these combos with a gentle reminder that I'm not someone who's speaking from a place of having all the answers, because I certainly don't, but rather stepping into the topics from a place of reflection and of noticing patterns. I'm doing this in hopes of trying to better understand ourselves and how we show up in relationships and emotional spaces. So, today I want to talk a little bit about reassurance, emotional processing, and vulnerability, and the difference between expressing emotions versus learning how to hold and process them intentionally. I'm finding there's a really interesting difference between being emotionally honest and feeling the need to express every emotion in real time. And I don't think people talk about that enough. I think a lot of people have probably had moments where they shared something emotionally and afterward wondered, why did I feel such an intense need to say all of that immediately? Or second guess that maybe they shouldn't have shared any of it at all. And honestly, I'm guessing that's not just a me thing, because I definitely have moments like that more often than I'd like to admit. And in moments of recent reflection, I've started to kind of realize that after many of those moments, I think maybe I wasn't just expressing a feeling. Maybe I was looking for relief from the feeling. And I also think a lot of people have experienced moments where someone pulling back emotionally felt far more destabilizing than they wanted it to. Maybe in reaction to something the other person shared, or maybe for unrelated reasons. Like logically, okay, this probably isn't as serious as it feels right now. But emotionally, it still feels really heavy. And those moments can reveal a lot about what we've quietly attached our sense of emotional safety to, not because we're trying to overwhelm anyone, but because the feeling itself feels overwhelming internally. And we're striving to feel emotionally steady again. Maybe subconsciously, emotional reassurance had quietly become tied to emotional safety, especially now in a culture where vulnerability is often seen as automatically healthy. Like, if we're open, if we're honest, if we're emotionally expressive, then that must mean we're emotionally mature. But I don't actually think it's always that simple, because honestly, I've always considered myself a pretty open person, for better or worse. Like, I'm definitely someone who talks things through. I share pretty easily. I process externally. Those who know me know that I'm probably a little too comfortable with TMI sometimes. And for a long time, I think part of me viewed that openness as automatically healthy, because in my mind, it meant, well, at least I'm being honest. Like, I told you, I explained this already. I wasn't hiding how I felt. And lately, I've been wrestling with the realization that honesty and emotional processing are not always the same thing as emotional clarity. Sometimes just because we express something doesn't necessarily mean the other person fully understood the depth of it, or the weight of it, or how actively it was affecting us internally. And honesty, sometimes I don't even know if we truly understand the depth of what we're feeling while we're expressing it in real time. Sometimes we're actively trying to make sense of it ourselves while it's coming out of our mouths. And I think there are moments where openness is healing and connective and healthy, but there are also moments where we're actually emotionally overflowing and trying to find somewhere to put the feeling. This is something I've had to become more aware of within myself too. I think a lot of people probably don't even realize the difference while it's happening. I think some people naturally process externally, meaning when they feel something, they talk through it. When they trust someone, they might tell them everything. Every insecurity, every fear, every spiraling thought. And sometimes it's quick to be labeled as attention seeking or even manipulation. And yes, sometimes it absolutely can become unhealthy. But I don't believe that's always the case. Sometimes it comes from wanting to feel understood, wanting connection, wanting reassurance, wanting to feel emotionally safe. And I think reassurance is an interesting thing to talk about because reassurance itself isn't bad. Humans need reassurance sometimes. We all want to feel seen and valued, chosen, emotionally considered, but sometimes reassurance can quietly become something bigger than comfort. Sometimes people start depending on reassurance for emotional stability without fully realizing it. And that can create really complicated relationship dynamics. Like when someone consistently checks in on you, reassures you, makes you feel emotionally prioritized, it can become something your nervous system starts expecting. Not in a manipulative way, just in a very human way. And then, if the dynamic shifts, if communication changes, if someone pulls back, if their attention gets divided elsewhere, it can feel way more emotionally destabilizing than it logically, quote unquote, should. And maybe sometimes what's actually happening underneath that is that reassurance slowly became regulation. That can be a really uncomfortable thing to sit with because it doesn't necessarily mean someone's toxic. It doesn't necessarily mean someone's manipulative. It doesn't mean the connection wasn't genuine. But I do think relationships can unintentionally drift into dynamics where one person starts carrying too much responsibility for the other person's emotional stability. And over time, that can become really heavy. Something I find interesting is how emotional safety can change how much we share. Because when people share deeply with someone they feel safe with, their instinct might become tell them everything, every insecurity, every fear, every hurt feeling, emotional reaction. But at times, people confuse total emotional access with closeness. Like, if I trust you, you should know every thought I'm having. Or if we're close, there shouldn't be filters. But I don't know if that's actually healthy all the time. I think there are moments where emotions are real, but still, you need space before expression because not every feeling is a final truth. Sometimes feelings are just information or their insecurity, their fear, their exhaustion, their old wounds getting activated. And I think emotional maturity may partially be learning the difference between this feeling is real and this feeling needs immediate expression. So I've also been thinking a lot lately about containment, which I know can sound like a cold word, but I don't mean suppression or pretending or bottling emotions up. I think healthy containment is more about discernment, timing, asking what needs to be processed privately first, what actually needs to become a conversation, who is appropriate to carry this with me. Am I looking for connection right now or am I looking for immediate emotional relief? Because there's a difference between processing and broadcasting unfinished emotions. And truthfully, I think a lot of us were never taught the difference. Another thing I've been sitting with is how good intentions don't automatically supersede impact. Someone can genuinely mean well and still create pressure, still create confusion, still create emotional weight in a relationship. I think that's difficult because most people want relationships to feel emotionally open, safe, and honest. But openness without boundaries can sometimes become emotionally overwhelming for both people. Sometimes, when emotions are high, people naturally create quick narratives to make sense of what they feel, which is why discernment matters, timing matters, and not every feeling needs immediate expression just because it feels urgent. I believe a lot of people probably relate to this more than they realize. especially people who are deeply emotional, deeply relational, deeply self-aware, people who care deeply about connection, because there's a fine line sometimes between vulnerability, emotional dependence, seeking reassurance, and emotional flooding. A question I've been mulling over a lot lately is, are you confusing reassurance with security? If any of this is resonating with you, I encourage you to maybe sit with that question too. Maybe ask, are you measuring love by attention? Do you feel emotionally destabilized when a relationship dynamic shifts? What about when you share something honestly? Do you later realize that maybe you needed to pause and reflect before expressing it to someone else? Like maybe afterward you fixate on, I probably shouldn't have said all that. Or maybe I should have slowed down and thought more before I expressed that. I don't think the answer is becoming emotionally closed off. I still think vulnerability matters deeply. People still need safe spaces, and yes, honesty is important. And maybe part of becoming better on purpose is learning how to feel deeply without needing every feeling immediately validated, soothed, or externally processed in real time. Maybe it's learning that privacy is not dishonesty. Maybe it's learning that some emotions need grounding before they need an audience. And maybe emotional maturity isn't about never needing reassurance, but learning how to stay emotionally anchored even when reassurance isn't immediately available. So, just some thoughts on what I've been sitting with lately. Maybe some of them resonated with you. Maybe some of them challenged you a little. Maybe some of them simply gave language to feelings you haven't fully known how to explain yet. Either way, thank you for sitting with me in another honest conversation. I really do appreciate you being here. And if this episode gave you something to reflect on, I hope you'll carry some of it with you throughout the week. Thanks again for joining me for another episode of Better on Purpose. And remember, how you show up matters, not just for the people around you, but for you too. I hope you'll join me again next week, friends. See you then.